We're here in my garage, Ott's Garage. Here's a how-to for you. Today I want to go over how to spool up a spinning rod. The way that I do it, there's a lot of ways out there that you can, but this is a few of the things that I've learned over the years that help me when I'm spooling up a spinning rod. The first one I'm going to do, something I get asked about a lot, is do you use backing? And I use it on all of my reels, spinning reels, bait casters, all of those. So much of my spinning reel fishing done anymore is with braided line and a fluorocarbon leader. But 10-pound braided line is really, really small. You're gonna waste a lot of it if you spool it up all the way to the very bottom of your spool. So I'm gonna start actually with some 30-pound. 30-pound is a lot bigger diameter than 10 is, and it'll eat up a lot more space on the spool quickly. If you've got some old line, if you've got some old monofilament, old fluorocarbon off of a bait caster, any type of old line will work for this scenario. You don't want something that's huge. You don't want something like a 20-pound diameter. It's just gonna be rough filling up the spool with that. But something in that, 10, 12, 14-pound diameter range to use as your backing line is what will work really well. So I'm gonna use this 30-pound braid. It's what I had laying here handy, had some extra of. But here's a really big tip for you. If you're putting braided line directly onto the spool of your reel, spinning reel or bait caster, you want to use a little piece of tape. I actually just pulled the line off of this one all the way down to show this, but I've got a small piece of electrical tape here. And I'm just going to peel that back a little bit and get this, get the end of this braided line down under that tape to actually get it started with. So you can see this little piece of electrical tape on there. It doesn't take much, man, just a little bit. If you cut off maybe an inch, and I actually cut it in half to where it's just a little small piece of electrical tape, and almost any kind of tape's gonna work there. Electrical tape was what I had handy the day that I filled this one up. Masking tape, duct tape, Gorilla tape, whatever you've got, just any kind of tape. Not only does that hold the end down, but what that really does, once you make that first couple wraps around it and it lays across that tape, it can't slip back through. If you just tie a braided line directly to the spool, it's always going to want to slip a little bit. But now here is the important part. You want that line to come off in I got to make sure I get this right, in a counterclockwise rotation. So as I pull it off the spool, you can see that it's coming off there counterclockwise. That's the way you want that line to come off of the top of that spool. So with this one, that's with the label up. You just got to check every single one of them because I've seen the same brand of line have a different way. They're just on the spool a little bit different. So now I'm going to spool this up. I'm going to get it up onto the spool a good ways, and then I'll stop and I'll show you just how much of that line for backing that I've put on the spool. Because you end up fighting this around a little bit. If it didn't have that little notch in that edge of the spool, it wouldn't be such a problem. Okay, so I'm in good shape now on how much backing I've got on there, and it's a little bit of just a learning game with it, but I'm going to show you up here real close. So on this spool up here on the top, it's got this next little groove. This is a Bass Pro Platinum spinning reel. That next groove is where it's going to be full, but if you look down here on the bottom of the spool, there's actually two grooves there. The first one is about where you want to spool it up to. If you get it close to that, that's really close to where you want to be with your backing. The next one is where you want to be with your finish line, what you're actually going to be using. You want to bring that out almost to that next little groove out there. So those grooves, that's what they're there for on that Platinum spinning reel. They're actually there kind of as a gauge as to how much line you've got on that reel. So I'm going to put just a couple more turns on there. Okay, now I'm going to cut this off, and I'm going to get out a spool of Bass Pro Hyper Braid, 10-pound test in yellow. I really like that yellow Hyper Braid for my main line. That's 15. That one's 20. I think I've got a spool of 10. Yep, here we go. Here's a spool of 10. But I really like that yellow Bass Pro Hyper Braid, man. It works extremely well. And 10-pound test is what I use the vast majority of the time. I carry 15, I carry 20, but 10-pound test, for me, man, it gets the nod about 80 or 90% of the time. So when I'm actually gonna put that, I'm going from my backing, that's my green backing line there, to my main, what's gonna fill up my spool, that main line to put on there. I use a very simple knot for this. So I don't tie an FG knot here, tying these two lines together. I don't take the time to do that. I don't tie an Alberto, because I never intend on getting down to this knot while I'm fishing. I have no plans of that. So I just lay those two lines together and I tie an overhand knot one time. That is all I do. One simple overhand. So just, I'm gonna do it again, but then I'll cut it off at the first one. Just lay those two lines together, pull them up, go over, pass it back through, an overhand knot. That is it. Because like I said, I have no intentions of ever fishing all the way down to my backing. If you do, you should probably tie something better. Probably tie an FG knot, because that knot ain't gonna hold a lot, but it's gonna hold enough to get that line started on the spool, and that's really all I need it for. So now I'm gonna fill up the spool the rest of the way. I will show you where that's at when I get there, but I'm gonna go ahead and get this one filled up. And as I'm putting that on there, I wanna make sure again that it's coming off counterclockwise, because that's the same way that bell is rotating around the spool. And that just reduces the amount of line twist that you end up getting in your line by doing that. So that is, yep, that's right up over that lip, but you can also still see that one little line down there on the bottom, just barely still showing. And on the top of the spool, it is just past that little lip there. And with braid, you really don't have to fill the spool completely to the top. That 10-pound braid is so small, so thin, that the spool doesn't have to be completely full to be able to throw a 16th ounce jig head a really long way. You don't have to fill it, as far up as you would with an 8-pound fluorocarbon to be able to get a long cast. So that's why I like that 10-pound braid, that hyper braid so much. So limp, it casts extremely well, and zero memory. That's what I always put on my spinning reels. But I'm gonna cut this off, run it through the rest of the guides. That's the boring part. Tie on an FG knot. I've got another video out there of doing that if you want to learn how to tie up an FG knot. But that's my spinning rod setup right there. 7-1, this is a medium light. I fish a medium light and a medium action spinning rod in that Platinum series for almost all my spinning rod fishing. But I hope this helped you learn how to spool up a spinning rod. It's a few of the things that I do myself. Hopefully you'll learn from and be able to do that the next one you buy.